Get the insulin down any way you can. Insulin resistance is at the corner that leads to all of these chronic metabolic diseases. They say, well, fasting insulin levels do not correlate with obesity. It correlates with metabolic health, and that's what you care about.
Have you ever wondered what diabetes, cancer, and obesity have in common? The answer lies in a single root cause: insulin resistance. Dr. Robert Lustig, a leading professor of endocrinology, explains that insulin resistance isn't just linked to these diseases, it's now connected to a wide range of serious health conditions.
Type 2 diabetes is a manifestation of insulin resistance at the level of the liver. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a manifestation of insulin resistance at the ovary. Cardiovascular disease is a manifestation of insulin resistance at the heart. Alzheimer's disease, we are learning, is a manifestation of insulin resistance in the brain.
The tricky part is that in the early stages, you might not even know you have insulin resistance. By the time most people reach 50, it often becomes clear their bodies just don't respond to insulin the way they used to. Dr. Lustig also points out a bigger problem. Modern medicine often overlooks this issue, doing little to raise awareness about just how serious and widespread insulin resistance really is.
93% of Americans have at least one aspect of metabolic dysfunction. Only 7% of Americans are metabolically healthy. And the way you know you have metabolic dysfunction is if you have insulin resistance. So that means 93% of Americans have a fasting insulin that's above, I would say, 5 microunits per mil. And that confers some degree of metabolic dysfunction. Now, most people don't know whether they have insulin resistance, and the reason is because they haven't gotten a fasting insulin drawn by their doctor. They haven't known to ask, and the doctor hasn't known to do it.
The key to fighting insulin resistance is tackling it at its root, and according to Dr. Robert Lustig, what you eat plays a central role.
What we've learned is that the primary driver of insulin resistance is liver fat. Fat in the liver. Now, once upon a time, 50 years ago, if you had fat in your liver, you were an alcoholic, period. That was the only thing that caused fat in the liver. Today, 45% of the US population has fatty liver disease. Now notice I didn't say 45% of the obese US population. I said 45% of the whole US population and 25% of the children. And notice I didn't say obese children. I said all children have fatty liver disease. Back in 1975, no one had it other than alcoholics.
Back in the 1970s, this condition in children was unheard of. Now it's become disturbingly common, fueled by the modern diet, packed with added sugars, processed foods, and unhealthy oils.
This is the biggest pandemic of all. Okay, this leaves COVID in the friggin' dust in terms of incidence and prevalence. Okay, it just doesn't kill you in 5 days like COVID did. Instead, it kills you in more like 15 to 20 years. But this is truly the biggest pandemic. Now, why does the liver store more fat? Why is the liver not burning that energy? And therefore, why does the insulin have to go up? And that's what this is really all about. Why are the mitochondria not working? Because if they were working, then number one, you wouldn't be storing the liver fat. Number two, your liver would remain insulin sensitive. And number three, your pancreas wouldn't have to make enough insulin, that much insulin to make the liver do its job, in which case, then you wouldn't be shunting sugar to fat. And there are a lot of things that can damage the mitochondria. Okay? Poor diet in general will damage the mitochondria because mitochondria are made of fats, but they're made of specific fats. And if you don't get enough of those specific fats in your diet, essential fatty acids in your diet, you can't make good mitochondria and they go bad easily, in which case you have mitochondrial dysfunction because you didn't eat the right fats.
In fact, a high-fat diet based on whole natural foods could be the key to longevity because it targets the root cause of most health problems, insulin resistance. Dr. Robert Lustig emphasizes that not all fats are created equal, and it's crucial to understand which types actually support your health. The first fats to include in your diet to combat insulin resistance are saturated fats. These consist of fatty acids with no double bonds, making them stable when heated, non-inflammatory, and most importantly, easily digested without triggering insulin release. You'll find healthy saturated fats in farm-fresh butter, eggs from free-range hens, and grass-fed beef.
Everyone thinks saturated fatty acids are the devil incarnate. They think that is the worst of all the fatty acids. And the reason they think that is because that's what we were told for 45 years. That's what, Ansel Keys told us back in the 1960s and 70s. Saturated fat was evil, okay, and why we all needed to go low fat because saturated fat was bad for you. In addition, because saturated fat is animal fat, okay, comes from, lard and from pigs and from cows. And saturated fat, if you get rid of saturated fat, that means you're getting rid of the cows and the pigs and the goats and everything. And the vegans would like that very much. So there's sort of a feed-forward problem there.
Since saturated fat mostly comes from animals, cutting it out wasn't just about fat. It also meant cutting back on animal products entirely. This lined up nicely with certain movements that preferred plant-based diets.
Turns out saturated fat is not one saturated fat, there are two. There's even-chain saturated fatty acids, which are what's in red meat. And then there are odd-chain saturated fatty acids, which are what's in dairy. Turns out the odd-chain saturated fatty acids are metabolized differently than the even-chain. And also the odd-chain saturated fatty acids have a different phospholipid signature. They have a tail on the end, which makes them polar, which makes them actually do very different things in the body because they can basically bind to other things and activate other things. That phospholipid is very important. And it turns out that phospholipid signature is anti-inflammatory. So it turns out the dairy saturated fat is actually anti-inflammatory, whereas red meat saturated fat is not. But it's not pro-inflammatory either.
A powerful ally in the fight against insulin resistance is polyunsaturated fat, most notably omega-3. This essential fat delivers a wide range of health benefits. Omega-3s help restore cellular sensitivity to insulin, particularly in muscle and liver tissues, and they enhance mitochondrial function. They also lower levels of C-reactive protein, a key marker of inflammation. Just as importantly for those aiming to lose weight, omega-3s help regulate leptin, the satiety hormone often disrupted in cases of metabolic syndrome.
Omega-3 fatty acids will help insulin resistance, no ifs, ands, or buts. It will also help depression, okay, because it will improve neural mitochondrial function, because remember, those mitochondria are made of omega-3s.
The best sources of omega-3 are wild fatty fish such as salmon. However, Dr. Lustig warns that farm-raised fish, especially those treated with antibiotics and fed grain-based diets, contain significantly less omega-3 and more omega-6, which can be harmful to the body. Plant-based sources like chia seeds and walnuts are also excellent alternatives for boosting omega-3 intake. Another highly effective tool in the fight against insulin resistance is monounsaturated fat.
Monounsaturated fatty acids. Oleic acid, found in olive oil. Now, this is a very good fatty acid. And the reason it's very good fatty acid is because it is the endogenous ligand. Oleic acid is the endogenous ligand for a receptor in your liver called PPAR alpha, peroxisome proliferation activated receptor alpha. And this is the fuel gauge on the liver cell, basically telling the liver to work more efficiently and work better. And so it has a lot to do with energy dynamics. And so when you are low in PPAR alpha, you don't burn energy as well. It has an effect on mitochondria. So olive oil is a good a good fatty acid. The only problem with olive oil is that the bond the double bond that caused it to be monounsaturated, because that's what we refer to when we talked about unsaturated, is the double bonds in the fatty acid, which is a long chain of carbons. There are two kinds of fatty acids. There's cis fatty acids and there are trans fatty acids. You want cis fatty acids. And the reason is because we don't have the enzyme to break a trans double bond. Olive oil is cis fatty acid. That's good. But if you heat an olive oil, if you heat oleic acid past its smoking point, which is relatively low for olive oil, 310 degrees Fahrenheit, 165 degrees centigrade, okay, which is easy to do in a saute pan. What you do is you put enough heat across, enough energy across that double bond that it will actually flip. And now you have created a trans fatty acid right in your skillet.
Monounsaturated fats are found in foods like avocados, macadamia nuts, and almonds. They play a key role in enhancing cellular sensitivity to insulin, reducing inflammation, and supporting heart health. Incorporating these three types of healthy fats into your diet is both simple and affordable. And by doing so, you're not just tackling insulin resistance, you're actively protecting yourself against 90% of the diseases most likely to shorten your life. Struggling to lose weight? Click the video to discover Dr. Jason Fung's fat-burning secrets to reset your hormones and unlock natural weight loss.